If you've started to dive into Dolby Atmos mixing at all, you've run into this thing called objects. And I want to break it down for you today so you can understand what objects are and how to use them inside of your Dolby mix. Hi, my name's Tyson. I'm a mastering engineer here at Dinosaur Dog Mastering. And today I want to dive into Dolby Atmos mixing a little bit more today and show you exactly what objects are and kind of how to use them inside of your mix and what the value is of objects versus just normal panning. Before I dive into that though, I want to let you know I have the ultimate mixing checklist available for download. This will help you get better and faster mixes. That link is in the description. The first link in the description will bring you to a page where you can download the ultimate mixing checklist. Okay, with that said, let's dive straight into the content of dealing with objects inside of Dolby Atmos. It's just a reminder, make sure you're wearing your headphones, otherwise you won't be able to monitor this properly. I have my renderer rendering all of this in a binaural setting, so if you don't have headphones, it's not going to sound right. Okay, let's talk about objects inside of Dolby Atmos. So there are two main ways to pan things inside of Dolby Atmos. We looked at this already in another video. This is the basic panning tool that you will see by default inside of a Dolby Atmos session inside of Logic. The other way that you can pan things is by creating what is referred to as objects. And your panner will look something like this, where this little guy here is an object. Creating objects, we're creating another channel essentially inside of a Dolby Atmos mix. Because a Dolby Atmos mix is not collapsed into a single file, such like a stereo mix is, we create additional channels by creating these objects. A Dolby Atmos mix can have up to 128 objects inside of a single Dolby Atmos mix. And these can obviously be very massive files by the end. I've heard numbers around 6 gigabytes is a normal Dolby Atmos mix. That's the finished final product, not the actual session itself. So a lot of memory can be taken up by Dolby Atmos. Anyway, all that being said, we have the surround bed and then we have objects. And the surround bed is made up of all of the items that are not objects. As we already looked at, this, for example, is just another element of the surround bed. And then we have objects. And so to create an object inside of Logic, what we would do is we would change the output to, instead of surround, we want to change that to 3D object panner. And now that we've done that, we now have an object created. And if you'll see over here, bass, we just created that, 13 bass and 13 bass. It's right here. There's a couple differences of an object versus just an element inside the mix that's being sent to the surround bed. First of all, the panning obviously is a little bit different. We can move this around a little bit more and change some elements here. The actual mechanics is relatively the same. We have left and right, back to front. That's kind of creating the angle, or replacing the angle, if you will. The elevation is exactly the same. We have 0 to 1. 1 being all the way to the top and 0 being at ear level. And then spread, which again, very, very similar to the other one. That's just how wide the stereo image is for that particular element. And then we also have size, which size is the only difference. Well, I say difference, but it's somewhat similar to the diffusion, I think it's called. Let's check here. Yeah, the diversity, excuse me. So it's very similar to diversity, where it's taking up more space inside of the mix. So we can now mess around with this. And so the size is essentially creating diffusion, if you will, inside of the actual mix. And so it's just going to take up more space. So I'm going to play this. I'm going to mess around with the size so you can hear the change over time here.
Know me, 'cause you made me. You made me to be like you. You know me, 'cause you made me. You made me.
So it is becoming louder because it's essentially taking up more room in other speakers in a Dolby Atmos setup, and it's just creating more sonic energy from the entire field around surrounding it, not just where it's at. So I don't use size very often, usually only for very specific elements for a very specific reason, to create dynamics inside of a certain part of the song, for example. That is usually the only time I ever use size, because it takes up more sonic space inside of the mix. Therefore, you have less sonic space for other elements to be able to use. Even though we have a lot more than a stereo mix, it's still impactful. We don't want to be overlapping too many things all at once. Again, generically, I like to keep everything on the wall except for a few select elements. But if we want to, we can just bring that closer to us like this.
Know me, 'cause you made me. You made me to be like you.
So, that might be a cool element to be able to use for our lead vocals, because that is the main part of the song, to bring that closer. So lots of options, lots of creativity that you can use in your mix, and you can do whatever sounds good for your song. Okay, one last thing I wanted to cover for objects inside of Dolby Atmos is this binaural render setting. So the binaural render setting, telling the renderer how much reverb to have inside of your mix. The way that Dolby Atmos actually works is essentially creating Haas delays inside of your headphones. And if you're not familiar with Haas delays, it's essentially adding a very slight delay and reverb. You say you're panning something to the right. What you're going to have is a louder signal on the right hand side, and then you're going to have a very, very slight delay. And then you're going to be able to hear that same sound on the left hand side, but it's going to be quieter. It's going to be a little darker, etc. And what that tells the brain, that's how we normally hear sounds to our right or our left. Dolby basically took that idea and expanded it all the way through what's behind you, what's in front of you, what's, all over. So there's some like really weird magic going on inside of headphones to really create a Dolby Atmos render. And none of this is perfect. Like they're obviously still improving this, and I expect this to get better and better as we move on. The binaural render setting that we are looking at over here is very important for the binaural rendition of the song. For example, my drums I have off, meaning I don't want any additional distance or reverb added to the drums, because I think it sounds a little odd. And from what I've heard, other people are also doing the same thing for their drums. So if we listen to the drums here, and I'm going to change this binaural render setting so you can hear the actual change that this makes. All right, so you can tell that there's definitely some differences in terms of the amount of reverb and other stuff going on inside of this binaural render. So kind of the best practice that I have run into is your surround bed should remain in the middle for the most part, unless you have a very specific reason not to do that. And then your 3D objects, this is based on whatever it is. So if I want my lead vocal to be really close to me, then I'm going to change that to near. Drums, I generally have it off because I don't want additional reverb messing with my drums. I rather them be up front, tight and punchy versus not. And then most everything else is in the middle. So this is very similar to my technique that I use in stereo mixes, which is creating a three-stage reverb where one of the spaces is very close, one of them is a medium, and then one of them is far away. And so this is essentially the Dolby version of that, and creating it just inside of the renderer itself. So this won't translate to other formats of Dolby, but in the binaural setting, this is very, very critical to get right. And again, most people are still listening to Dolby Atmos inside of headphones. All of that said, this is objects for Dolby Atmos. Remember, you can create objects inside of your Dolby Atmos mix by changing the output to 3D Object Panner, and that will be able to create your object inside of your Dolby mix, and then you can change the actual binaural render setting so that it's either near, far, or off. Make sure that you're keeping your elements on the wall as much as possible just to create as much sonic space inside of your Dolby mix as possible. Okay, with that said, that is the basics of Dolby Atmos objects. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below this video. I would love to hear what your questions are around this and how I can help you better. Also, if you found this at all valuable, then don't forget to subscribe, as I make videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to help you get more professional mixes. All right, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.